Cool.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Kyle and Rachel. I'm Mike Arney again from Halftone Digital here in Minneapolis. This is the Webflow Minneapolis Meetup, and we're here to ramble about some of the work we do. So as I was saying before, we kind of use Webflow in two steps or two different facets of the business. One is the typical usage that you would think of it as a marketing website creation platform, right? Like a no code, easy way to spin up a marketing website, big or small. So we do that pretty frequently, less frequently than we have in the past, but that's not due to lack of interest in the tool. It's due to like business priorities shifting. And then the other side of the fence is using it as a design tool and a place for proof of concept. And that's, so from my background as a designer, that's where I think it's the most interesting. I love what Webflow does as far as like a marketing tool as well, or a marketing website builder, but I'm really interested in using it to, in some cases, show developers what we want to make, right? So I've got this one little case study that I'm going to jump into, and this is a project that we're working on for Adobe. And I'm actually just not going to say the name of the project, just know that it's a bunch of articles. So this is just a really quick, cross section of how I think Webflow can be. I would say this is more of an anecdote, right? So we've got these design pages that we've created in Adobe XD. And we've got some of these little interactive gizmos, and we've got some functionality here that is in the back of our minds as to how this page should work when it's live, when it's published. And so this is, I guess this can kind of be a test to see how well this works. But the thought is that we've got this kind of awkward white space. And my thought when designing this was that as when the user scrolls down, we would have the content kind of stick to the top of the browser if there is white space, follow the browser down to the bottom of the white space, and then unstick and continue scrolling. So if you're not sure what that meant, that's good, because the developers that we were talking to, they're like, oh yeah, we get it, but I'm pretty sure they didn't get it. So this was a great example for me anyway of like, I know I can do this. I know I knew that they were I could sense that they were having trouble with this. So it was like, well, let's just flip over to Webflow and really quickly spin up a proof of concept. So I came over here, I dropped in a big section where there's going to be an image. I did a quick little tutorial because I couldn't remember exactly how to do this within Webflow, right? Like, as you don't remember every little thing every time. But it was pretty straightforward. It's, simply this idea of like sticky positioning. The sticky positioning kicks in at 30% from the top of the page. So as you're scrolling down, the image stays there so that the user can read their content and reference the image as they're reading their content. When we get down to the bottom of the container, when the bottom of the container comes up to the bottom of the page, sticky then goes away and the image scrolls away. So this was kind of like, okay, I think this worked in the way that I wanted it to, but it was like, hey guys, so here's what I'm thinking. And I think I got a lot of kind of ahas after that, right? And we can do the same thing with text. If we want the text to be there while these images are kind of floating away, then it's easy enough to do so. So, I think this probably took like 20 minutes to spin this up really quick. And I believe it's been a helpful tool for developers in understanding how we want to execute this design. And yeah, I think that was just kind of like, for me, that was kind of like a moment when I realized that, okay, I can use this as a tool. I can use this as a place to put up proofs of concept, amongst many other things. So I really like the idea that we can put something together pretty quickly, still being technical, and get our point across. The other thing that I wanted to show was some augmented reality that we got working. So I am not a Webflow expert by any means. The person that linked in chat to some conference with some YouTube Webflow guru, that's not us. But to say, like, to have a client come and say, hey, can you guys throw together some sort of augmented reality experience for these laptops that we make? And this was through a partner agency. And, you know, it was kind of like, I think we can, I'm not positive. But we did, and we put it together pretty quickly, and it works great. So this is, and I'll drop this into chat, but this is the 3D model. You're able to get onto the page itself. This is not using like a big giant library or anything. It's using, it's a Google 3D viewer library. I'm forgetting what it's called right now. But this was, again, another proof of concept. Like, obviously this is not real content. We're just pointing out a feature of this machine, this HP, I think it was. And we can rotate around. And some of you are probably thinking that's not augmented reality. You're right. But if you open up this link on your phone, it'll work, right? Like it'll be like the browser wants to access your camera, and you'll be able to put this thing right on your desktop, and it looks really cool. To the point where I was kind of surprised that it worked as well as it did. And so I put the link in chat if anybody wants to try to like open that on your phone and just see how it works. I think it works really well. And this was just super hacky, right? Like, to be honest, you know, I found a tutorial, and I made it work for what I wanted it to work for, right? Like we imported a library. This one, Model Viewer, is the name of the library. We imported that, we customized it, we got the model in there that we needed. We had a couple different versions of the 3D model that were hosted on a server that's completely open, and 2 different versions, one that works on iOS and one that works on Android. And, you know, it was probably 4 or 5 hours of futzing, trying to get this to work, but eventually it did. So again, it's not like a production piece of content, but it's a proof of concept. It's like a, hey, this is what we can do. And, you know, something that I would have really needed a highly skilled developer to do for us in the past that would have taken them a week or 2. We were able to hack it together and throw it together in a couple hours. So, so that's my side of it. And that's like the design tooling side of it. I think there's a lot more to go. If we have time, I think Paul maybe has some cool stuff that he can show, possibly.
Totally,
but
yeah.
To look at the other side of the business, I think Johnny was going to walk through now, kind of like the marketing side. So we got on the Webflow experts list. I applied for it like a 1.5 years ago, and because we're on there now, we get a fair amount of pings for work, right? Like potential projects, and yeah, so we're rolling with that on the other side of things. So. And I don't know if you're a co-host, Johnny, and you might need to be in order to share.
I can make Johnny a co-host here.
Awesome. While Kyle's doing that too, I'd love to make this as valuable as possible. But I did hear that a few of you are agency owners, right? You have your own agency, and others are within the company that is, whether you're in business development or community. Do we have any freelancers in here that's using Webflow?
I mean, I've more or less moved to freelancing on the side. So I think if I remember correctly what you're going to talk about, I'm excited to hear.
Yeah. It's a little bit about that. And it's, I think, towards a little bit more B2B, if anything, than Webflow. But I can mention some things on Freelancer, my own experience before, again, Mike and I met. So give a little bit more information of what I do exactly at Halftone. I think a major part of my role is really helping clients come and build a marketing page through Webflow, right? So I handle a lot of the clients that come through, leads that come through, and also outreach as well. And so what I'm going to be covering is some of the, I guess, strategies and tactics that we're implementing and using on top of the experts page that Mike has mentioned. So I will go ahead and put together a little quick deck so you can have something other than this face to look at. Give me a second there. Perfect. Do you guys see that?
Yep.
Awesome. Nice. So we're going to introduce ourselves. We did that a little bit. But for some of you that know Webflow, or at least just have heard a little bit, I just want to point out three big key points about Webflow, right? They're evaluated at about $2.1 billion company. They just raised over $174 million just this year alone. And really, it's to put their foot down and leave a footprint and really say that we're here to stay. And their initiative as a company is going towards more enterprise companies too. So, you know, you think about the big Dells, you think about those, large companies, and those companies are looking for a partner it's here to stay. And so that's what Webflow is doing this year, is really building capital on that. They have about 220,000 live websites, and they track about 6 million visitors a month. So the reason why I'm giving you this information is to show you how serious they are and how big and rapid they've grown since 2000. I believe they came out in 2013. It talked about Webflow as a design tool, what we've done here at Halftone. Mike went over that. And then for me, really want to cover about Webflow as a business model here at Halftone, how we're doing it, giving you some, I guess, insights into our approach and things that have been working for us, right? Now, this is still a relatively newer, I think, Mike, hopefully I can say this, a relatively newer business model of Halftone. You know, been here for about 7-8 months here, really helping grow this section out. We've done over, I believe, 25 websites in the past year. And so really looking to expand this into the hundreds. Yeah, so we're going to be covering 3 points. New business, you know, how we're doing it, client relationships, at least, you know, how we're currently retaining some of these clients, and then some digital strategies and how you can generate more leads for not only your agency, but your business. With the new business and client relation, it really comes down to solving a problem, right? I don't think I need to show a lot of you or to tell you a lot of you about the basics of business development, but some of the clients that we've talked to, actually a lot of the clients that I talked to, they are either scrappy people who are at an agency and they're learning how to create their own website. So they found Webflow and they're starting to develop it, and then they get stuck. They don't know where to go from there, and then that's when they come to us, right? The second part is that we actually work with a lot of design executives who have tried to do it at a startup and then get stuck again, and then they come to us. And so my number one goal is always try to find a problem, and then number two is pitch a solution. So that problem always, it's funny, the problem is it always comes down to they're trying to transition from WordPress into an easier to use platform, right? And so WordPress, you have to deal with developers, you have to deal with potential at times plugins that are bogging down your website performance. And then what I really try to do is pitch a solution to that. I don't talk about all of the features of Webflow because there's just too much, right? If a client is having issues currently editing their own website, I pitch them about Webflow's editor feature, right? Here's how you do it. Here's a short video on how you can easily edit your page by clicking on a specific paragraph and typing right into it. And then lastly, we sell an onboarding experience. I'm very fortunate to be at Halftone. Halftone has amazing designers like Paul, Mike himself too, and we have an animator, Sarah. They're great at what they do in design. You know, I do a little bit of design in Figma, but really my role is to implement it in Webflow, and I sell the whole experience of the onboarding of how we can really turn a website out within a month versus typical WordPress website, which takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months, right? And so that's a key selling point for, at least for us as well. And then lastly, really tying it into client relationship is just following through with this, following through with the problem you're trying to solve, the solution that you've pitched, and then the onboarding experience that you've provided. At least in my freelance past, what's really helped me the most is pitching how fast I can do it, you know, within a couple of weeks versus a couple of months. And then from there, being able to spin something up really quick, kind of like what Mike mentioned, using Webflow as like a concept tool, spin it up, get a wireframe out there, and then being able to provide a cohesive experience. Do you have any questions on new business client relations? Nope. All right.
I have
Yeah.
a quick question. So this is something I'm learning with the potential clients. So the paradox between fast and the price, it seems like the clients that want things done quickly seem to think it costs the least. So I was wondering why, like, wanting to shorten the timeline.
Yeah, so a lot of it is shortening the timeline is that it is going to cost a lot less, right? In terms of you're not going to have people or labor on extended amount of hours. And so even though they do have the perception that it is going to be, I guess, less expensive, we still have a minimum on our end that we pitch that we always were upfront with, whether that's going to take us 3 months to 6 months versus a month. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Any other questions? No. All right. So then we'll actually go into some of the strategies and then specific tactics and of how not only have we done it Halftone, but what I've seen specifically, like I believe, I forgot who was at your name, but you're at FinSuite, Colleen. I think, is it Colleen? You're at FinSuite?
Well, I'm not at FinSuite, but
Okay.
I work with somebody who does.
Okay.
Co-organizer. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, you mentioned the name, and Joe and I forgot the CMO at the company, but they're doing a great job in terms of like lead generation for Webflow. And really it comes down to these, if you look at part one, it comes down to these three buckets, right? And it really is a mindset shift where, number one, they're establishing themselves as an expert, and I'll go into how you can do that as well. Number two, they're solving a real problem where people are having issues, whether that's with WordPress or any other platform, and the solution is Webflow. And then lastly, they're getting involved in the community, right? Webflow is still relatively new if you think about it, 8 years old. But if you're part of it and you're having the conversation and you're helping develop the system itself, this is really where you're going to establish a name for yourself. And then part two is the actual tactics themselves. I think there is a ton of, it's just like marketing. There's a ton of strategies out there. You hear a bunch of different things from different gurus or experts, but really execution is key. Choosing one thing to focus on for the next 3 to 6 months is really what's going to benefit you the most versus trying to do everything at one time.
And I think, one of the parts of the tactics that I am personally a huge fan of is this like real-time collaboration aspect of Webflow, and the idea that you can refresh a staging server in 30 seconds, right? Like, I come from like the old advertising world here in Minneapolis, and there was this really prevalent strategy of like, you present something to a client and then you pull the curtain back again and you go work on it for 2 weeks, and you come back and you present it again. And like, it's just not very efficient, right? Maybe it's a better way to handle relationships, but it's just not, it doesn't feel collaborative to me. It feels present-y. It feels like somebody is doing something for you. So I really like the fact that we can throw up something, quick and dirty is a term that we use a lot. And depending on the client, if they have experience with this type of thing, sometimes we show them wireframes in Webflow. Sometimes we show them really rough infrastructure if they can wrap their head around it, if we deem them capable of understanding, the point that we're at. But to have that option, I think, is really powerful.
Absolutely. And Mike, that point leads on to the next part exactly, where we're looking at a couple of like a digital strategic tactics in terms of like lead generation, or just how to get your name really out there. And what Mike has mentioned about being able to be collaborative in that form really probably falls down in this Webflow Showcase column. if those of you that have used Webflow, I think you know Showcase. For those of you that don't know what the Showcase is, it's really where designers can go in and showcase your product, right? If you create something amazing like a 3D modeling, like what we've done here at Halftone, we can share it, and it can be a community-driven kind of rating. They can give you a rating to really showcase you in the very front of the page. This is definitely one way to really showcase your expertise. I've used that word so much, and establish your name in the Webflow community. I know FinSuite has done an amazing job with this. I think every year they collaborate with Webflow to do kind of like a recap of the year, right? So if you go and look at, if you just type in Webflow Showcase and you type in 2020 recap, FinSuite, they built this whole interactive page for Webflow on how, on basically just the whole year of 2020. But to really go all the way back and talk about some of the tactics, I categorize in these 4 buckets, right? The first one is really the Webflow and / third-party forms. So that could be the actual Webflow form itself, where there's questions. There's that Reddit form. There's also Discord, Slack channels, right? And to get involved in this, I think the number one thing you need to be doing is being able to help solve the problem, right? There's always questions going out there. If you could be proactive and you'd be the first one to help solve a technical problem from a design standpoint, or just from a new user to Webflow standpoint, you're really getting your name out there, right? You're solving a problem, you're establishing expertise. However, I guess one of the con of it is that you're at the mercy of the platforms, whichever form that you decide to utilize. And then the second column, yeah, I've talked about Showcase, Webflow Showcase too. I've seen agencies built or have done 30 days design. So what they've done is every day they're designing a new feature that's helping the community. And so what they do is they design it every single day. They show it on the Showcase so that people can easily duplicate and copy into their own website. That is one way to really help. Number one, you're somewhat, depending on how you're doing it, you're solving a problem. Number two, you're establishing expertise. And then there's also own media, right? I keep using FinSuite as an example, but I really think they are leading this channel in terms of business development just for Webflow. That's what they focus on. And they have their own, they have this series on YouTube and on their page called Growth Series. And they talk everything about how they got started with Webflow and how they're growing it. And they have their own media where they're showing people how to use the system and then how to build their own business around it, right? It does all three, depending on how you, again, approach it. You're helping solve a problem, but really establishing yourself as an expert, and then it's your own platform, whether that's on your webpage, whether it's on your own YouTube channel. And then lastly is the Webflow Meetups, right? Another way to really help just get your name out there and really establish a kind of a lead source for what you're doing with Webflow. It's going to these things and meeting wonderful people who are on the same journey as you, and finding a way to really just solve a problem that they could that they may need help with.
Yeah, very cool. So I know that we have a Q&A slide next.
Yep.
Was there anything that you wanted to look at, Paul? And I sorry to put you on the spot. I know
Yeah.
talk about
Sure. I might just throw a couple
and,
of
and you know, I think like as far as Q&A, Rachel and Kyle, if you have any guardrails you want to put around this, but I mean, we're happy to talk about anything, you know, business-wise, CMS, whatever is on y'all's mind.
I mean, really, like kind of in the past, there have been no guardrails, and that's been the exciting part.
Right.
Sure.
So I don't have a oh, excuse me, Paul, I'm trying to make you co-host.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions coming out of that as well. I didn't want to mess up the recording, even though I was talking during it anyway.
You were talking during it?
I know. I like chimed in, and then you know.
No, it was great. Thanks for letting us record that, by the way.
Yeah. Paul, do you see the share screen?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Here, let me just. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to pimp out our YouTube page, Halftone's YouTube page. we kind of make these tutorials every once in a while, little tips and tricks. And we kind of realized a little bit through the pandemic that since we weren't in an office together anymore, we weren't able to like sit over each other's shoulders and say, hey, how do I do this in Illustrator or XD or Figma or whatever? And we weren't able to say like, oh, I know how to do that. And you hit this little shortcut and you do this or that. So we kind of started making these little tutorial videos, and I've made a handful of them about Webflow. But we also have stuff on After Effects and Figma and XD and all these things. So check that out. I think we got some I don't know, we got some good stuff in here, I guess.
Yeah.
So check that out if you want a little some tips and tricks here and there. But yeah, basically like for me, like I don't know, I like to use Webflow in kind of a creative way and just kind of like think of fun ideas, I guess, almost, and try to make them. And what I kind of know how to code. I've been okay in HTML and CSS, but then I kind of hit this wall where I was like, I'm trying to build sites for my friends or like for small businesses and stuff, and they want to take it and they want to use the CMS and all that. And I don't know a lick of PHP or any of that. So, WordPress is kind of off the table for me, and I don't want to get into it. And I don't know how to animate stuff on the web real well. So, JavaScript and all, JSON or, JavaScript and all that is just like, it scares me, I guess. So when I kind of figured out Webflow and being able to make things move, and then once I learned the CMS situation, it was kind of like, mind blown sort of situation. And like, this is kind of like what I've been looking for a really long time. So I'm just going to run through a couple sites that we've kind of made. Some are just things I've made up for fun, and some are for totally for clients. So first site is this Ion Prosthetics. These are some dudes down in Nebraska who we've been working with a little bit lately, and they make prosthetics for kind of this community-driven prosthetics, I guess. And we did this whole, if you can see that in the background, we got this whole 3D model moving in the background. So the other kind of cool thing about Webflow is the integration with Lottie and all that. And we kind of got this image stack Lottie situation going on back here. That's all controlled by the scrolling. And, we're just able to make a nice, pretty simple site for them pretty quickly with a lot of little goodies and hover effects and little slider pieces here and there, and just kind of a landing page for these guys that is just kind of fun and nice and simple. And they're real collaborative, and they're able to kind of let us mess around and take our suggestions on things, and it turned out pretty nice. Moving on, this is another client, Voyager saunas here in the Twin Cities, where we did a big, it's kind of one of the bigger sites I guess we've done for this local sauna maker, which is nothing mind-blowing, I guess, but it was working with them and getting all their content in here, making some little animations, some little simple animations, kind of surprise and delight in there. Like Johnny mentioned, our animator Sarah can just spin up these lotties and these things real quickly, and we can just take them and drop them right into Webflow, and boom, they're kind of working, and they're totally scalable, and there's nice, super nice things that we're able to make this thing real easy and real quick, and super fun to work on.
I didn't know you guys did that site, and I'm pretty sure I've looked on every page of that site because they had this were they the ones that had like this really big sale? Like it was like 50% off saunas, and then
maybe, I don't remember.
There was like a one day, it was like half a day sales. Like you
really?
Can quickly get in it. I don't know. But I know I've been on the site, and I was like, I want all of these.
Yeah. Their big thing is these mobile saunas that you can just kind of tow behind a truck and, kind of drop it next to a lake and get it going. So yeah, we're able to just kind of like make these nice templated pages, and they can swap in and out content and, adjust the specs and all that stuff super easily. And once kind of Johnny joined our team, he was able to kind of take some of this stuff and just kind of start adding onto it, which kind of made me feel validated that he was able to kind of go in and change the stuff that I was building. Another example is a local company called X Factor. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. where they kind of like an event and marketing company. And we made this site for them that just kind of allows them to showcase their work. And, we did some of these nice little hover effects, and this is all powered by the CMS in the background. So that was super fun to put together and kind of figure out, and how do we kind of, a lot of challenging techniques of like pairing the CMS with interactions in Webflow, and kind of this interesting, cool stuff that you can just set stuff up once, and then you can kind of swap out all the content in it. So you can click into each one of these, and there's these sliders in here where they can, put a gallery of images in, and then there's these chunks of content and just these big image areas, and it's all kind of flexible, but there's a lot of stuff in here, a little bit of stuff in here. It all kind of works the same, and it, hooking up all these related projects and all this kind of stuff, just kind of, you kind of do it right the first time and it just kind of works forever. Let me just keep going here. Here's a site I did for fun, just to kind of teach myself some stuff. It's a podcast called The Dollop, and it's an American history podcast. These comedians talk about kind of wild stories from American history that aren't really taught in your everyday history class in school. So just learning some things like, how that, and this idea of like big intro kind of fades out as you scroll down. I don't know how to do that. Let's figure it out, and then it just kind of goes into this, all these things are based on different dates in history, and that the episodes are kind of randomly, all over the place. And I thought, let's try to put them into a timeline, and how do I make this like big, stretchy, like date range, and then have stuff scroll over the top of it and have it, kind of like Mike was showing earlier, kind of this sticky situation, and do this cool hover effect where the line kind of moves and things change color, and just kind of had this slight idea, sketched a couple things out in Figma, and then quickly moved over to Webflow and was able to just kind of make it happen. And another cool thing here too was like something like I started to make it with the CMS, so you could just kind of copy and paste links and type in text into a box. But then I kind of hit a guardrail with Webflow where our plan works right now. We can only have 50 CMS items or something like that, I think. And I was like, well, that's not very great. There's like 400 episodes of the show. So I kind of switched some of these things around to be symbols inside of Webflow instead of that. So there's symbols with overrides, and it kind of works almost the same as CMS, but you're kind of skirting around some of those guardrails. So just kind of some problem solving stuff kind of on the fly. It's kind of fun to do. And also kind of working in this big menu at the top where it pops open, takes over the whole page, some slick animation happening. And then you can click each of these date ranges and it scrolls down the page and closes the menu at the same time. And all that kind of stuff where it was just like, I don't know how to do that, but let's, take some time and try to figure it out.
Did you send this to them?
Not yet, no.
You gotta send it to them. That was awesome.
Okay, all right, cool. Here's another thing. I really like beer, as I mentioned earlier, and just this idea that I've kind of always had, and I had a couple sketches of it here and there, of just like beer label designs are really great, and I really like them. And this idea of like, oh, it's gonna load slow. Oh no. Okay, so this idea of like mousing over an image and seeing a beer can rotate. I think I'm missing an image in here. But again, this is all powered by the Webflow CMS. So I just kind of go in the back end and upload like 5 or 6 images or whatever this is built from. And you can kind of just see these beer cans rotate and fill in some content about them, use the drop downs to kind of figure out what kind of beer it is, what kind of vessel it comes in, who designed it, all that kind of cool stuff. Yeah, anyway, just kind of a little hack together project that was kind of fun. Moving on, sorry, I'm going super fast. Another podcast website, I also really like podcasts, is these dudes called It's The Real. They're 2 brothers in New York that run a hip hop podcast. And at the beginning of every episode, they do like this AKA thing where it kind of like a hip hop thing that rappers will do where they say, blah, 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 AKA blah, 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 and they'll kind of make stuff up. And I wanted to learn how to do like a randomized generator kind of thing. So they have, again, like hundreds of episodes of this podcast, and they say a different AKA for each of them at the beginning of each episode. and I wanted to try to make this kind of AKA generator, I guess. And so I've got like probably 30 or 40 episodes loaded up into here, and you click this show me another button and it loads up a different text and a link to that episode from here. So it all kind of works. This is a pretty simple tutorial that I just kind of found, but also pairing it with like this Lottie animation when we're loading, and just the way that things load in. Just trying to get timing down, figure stuff out, as well as figure out the CMS and figure out the randomizer bit, and just trying to teach myself new things, and can pop this little guy open at any time, all that kind of stuff. Just trying to learn new stuff and say, hey, if a client came to us and asked for this exact thing or something similar, we can at least say we know how to do it and figure it out. This is like a real rough thing.
Well,
Just like type sketch. Sorry, yeah.
Well, just before we go too far, I just wanted to check
Totally.
on with Rachel. And
Oh yeah, good call. Sorry, I'm flying through this stuff.
No, I actually think it's kind of fun seeing stuff that you've made. I think it's pretty cool. I've got a handful of questions, but I think let's if I'm writing them down and we can chat about them later. If you want to power through the last few, I
Just
like
give me
seeing
like
what you're-
2 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. This is like a little type sketch I had from like years ago. These little, like just drawing some little type, and I had this idea for like, I really liked how the lines worked and like this kind of separator line thing, and just being able to just be like, hey, what would that look like if it was able to like be flexible? That middle line was just flexible and like scaled the top chunk of the page, and just had an idea. Didn't really go anywhere. Still hasn't gone anywhere. You're the only people I've ever shown this to, but it's just kind of something that I wanted to make and see if I can make them kind of line up with the end of the F there and be consistent as things scale down, and just kind of trying stuff and seeing what happens, because I think it would be cool, and just a thought in my head. There's another site, this dude, he's kind of like this content creator guy, and I think he's from Canada actually. And his website was really garbage, and I kind of wanted to redesign it. And so I tried to redesign it. And also it's just idea of just like really minimal intro of just photo and text. And as you scroll down, it fades out. And I wanted like the nav to kind of pop up as you scroll down. So just that idea was just something I had in my head. And again, just tried to make it. And also pairing that with like he directs music videos and stuff, and using the CMS, or not the CMS, the built-in Webflow Lightbox thing, and trying to like customize it a little bit, throw in a little custom code here and there, just make it look a little bit nicer than it does by default, and just kind of use it. And you can play these videos and then click close, and the video all closes together. It's not like this hacky kind of thing. It kind of works as you'd expect. Again, just trying to mess around with some stuff, and just had some ideas and wanted to try to make it. I actually sent this to this guy, and he never got back to me, so take that as you will. And then here's kind of a little tutorial thing we made on our YouTube channel. You can go watch the like 20-some minute video of it, showing you how to make kind of a custom from scratch mobile nav, with a little animation of the X, and kind of saying that like the default one that Webflow gives you is fine, but wanting to take a little bit more control of that and have a little bit more flexibility over not just the look and feel of things, but also the animation, the way things come in, and building this kind of custom menu that animates when you click it. That's kind of another small thing. And then one last thing here is I really liked the new branding that Twitch came out with last year, 2 years ago, something like that. And they have this kind of like little external link that's used all across their site. And I really like the way that the animation works. So I just tried to recreate it, and you can kind of hover this thing, and it just kind of like slides this arrow in and out. And I don't know, I just wanted to say, hey, could I make that in Webflow? And I kind of just tried to do it. And it probably took me an hour to figure out every little bit of it, but I kind of did it. Okay, I'm done.
That was awesome.
Sorry.
And did it. No, thank you.
Thanks. Cool. Right on. Cool.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Maybe this is probably for the whole group, but also for our designers out there who use Webflow is there was a lot of talk of going from Figma to Webflow or XD to Webflow. Or do you ever design in Webflow? I think Joy, you had told me that you're starting designing in like directly in Webflow, but I never do that. I always have a Figma. I always have something in Figma, but I'm curious if there's anyone who does design in Webflow, what they think about it.
We do.
Curious too. Yeah.
Yeah, not very often. I think, when the case calls for it, though, there's definitely reasons to do so. We're working on a small-ish project that we've been working on for like the last 6 months, and quite honestly, my client didn't have the budget for us to go through rounds and rounds of design concepting, and so I was like, you know what, let's just try it. Let's just jump into Webflow. Let's show them. They're another marketing agency, so this is the one that I was talking about earlier, where I was like, okay, and sorry, my bandwidth is low, so I turned off my camera. But we said, like they get it. They know, they've seen how the sausage is made. It's okay to kind of show them works in progress, I think. And so far it has proven to be that, and we've really kept their budget very low, much lower than it would have been had we had done, 50, 60 hours of design concepting and revisions. So, that's more of an experiment, but I think I would do it again. And maybe you can speak to that, Johnny. That's the KWP.
Yeah. So I think I've in the past have just used, wireframes, and so we're currently in the process of building my own wireframe, so I can easily click and drag the symbols right into it, and we have the header, we have a section, the content section, and I've done it multiple times, and I've got to say it is super easy. One thing to mention, Mike has mentioned it too, is it depends on your client, right? Are they somebody who understands, like, do they know how to make the sausage? They know how, that it takes iterations to get to the final products, or are they going to be somebody who's going to look at your first wireframe and be like, this is a crap website, even though it's just empty boxes and lower ipsums, right? And it's helped. I think it helps with your client who is a little bit tighter on budget, because now we don't have to design it fully in Figma and then have to transfer everything over. And so if you're doing wireframes in Webflow, I would highly recommend you create your own wireframe kit, or look at some of the Webflow showcases. There's been some amazing people in the community who's create Webflow wireframe kits that you can kind of duplicate and make your own of it. Of course, credit them if you're using it, and kind of go that route too.
And just to piggyback off that too, like the idea of giving somebody like comps or designs or whatever, like just as a staging link kind of right off the bat, it's like it automatically is that much closer to a real thing rather than a bunch of images or PDF or a Figma link or whatever. Like you're literally like, you can pull it up on your computer, you can pull it up on your phone, you can do this or that. Like it feels real. It's, probably scalable to a degree at that point in time. And I don't know, just kind of feels more real. And then as you make changes, just kind of hit refresh on that link and you see the new stuff,
It's frankly blows people's socks off still,
right,
too,
exactly.
to like throw up a staging link and have something for them to look at in a browser in 3 days. And I like that. I mean, I think it's fun to push the boundaries in that direction. Like eventually we'll get there as an industry too, where that becomes commonplace, right? So like, I think anyway, depending on the difficulty or the complicated nature of what you're working on, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to throw up like a basic outline of a marketing landing page in a couple hours and publish it and have somebody go to their browser and look at it on both desktop and mobile device. Like that's the way things are heading. So we may as well start trying to do that now, is I think part of the philosophy.
Right. And speaking for myself and probably most of us, it would probably take me just as long to like wire everything up as a prototype in Figma or XD than it would to just link up a navigation inside a Webflow. Like, same thing.
The right tool for the right job, right? Like the project that I was showing you that we're working on for Adobe, that it makes 0 sense to put that in Webflow, of course, right? So no, we won't do that. But there are a lot of projects where it makes a ton of sense. And yeah, so anyway.
Joy, what was your experience? You said you've been doing it?
Oh yeah, so I work with kind of a range of clients, but some of my clients are more of the smaller business owners, the 1 to 2 owners in a business. So it's very hands-on. For them, I've been burned before where I feel like I'm confident and I built it in Webflow and then found out we needed to backtrack. But more oftentimes than not, I'll do a heavier discovery with them and get buy-in on design, and we'll do a whole discovery on even animations and layout and even nav placement, all that kind of stuff beforehand using other websites. And then once I get buy-in, I basically know pretty close to what they want. And then I spend something up and then they're just blown away. So we can just knock through like 2 pages in a week and then keep going. So that's worked really well for me to just take the extra time in the front to really get everyone bought in on the design and the concept without doing a bunch of heavy actual design mock-ups, and actually do it all built in Webflow quick, and then going back and then kind of establishing some of that extra framework, going back and fixing your forms, those kind of things after the fact, but getting them bought in on, you know, the blocks is a good term for the customer.
I could see it being a thing that now you might, maybe there's still a design phase that's in a different tool, but just how fast, I mean, because what we're talking about is speed, basically speed to something. If that's like a S2S, I'm just coined that right now, speed to something. And I could see that being a really useful tool if you're trying to make an impression on like an RFP where
Totally.
where they're, you know, they basically put this thing out and they're like, hey, we're looking for this, this, and this. And you've got to, pick on Jay where they've got like I think they're going for more RFPs now, but like bigger fish. Right. And they've got a design team that can actually spend some time on it. And it's like, well, instead of just like mocking stuff up, that's like a clickable prototype that like goes from static image to static image. If you can actually be like, no, here's your link. And oh yeah, it doesn't matter if you're looking on a phone, doesn't matter if you're looking on on your mega large screen. You can show interactions and, doing all that stuff. And you could be like, and here's just a little taste of what we can do for you. Like that's a really compelling, thing. Now, you might end up building something, then you don't win the RFP because your pricing's off or something. But that could be the S2S just really increases your likelihood of getting the WIN.
Right.
Yeah. We've got that on video.
You should leave to trademark that right now.
I know, right?
Like when you said something, I thought of like, we create artifacts, right? We're pushing towards a final artifact that's highly polished and ready for the world to see. But along the way, there are multiple artifacts. So like the speed to something or an artifact being a digital artifact very quickly, it's super impressive and people love it. Like I can tell you for sure that like we get dumbfounded looks a lot of times when it's like, yeah, we just click this link, it's there, just go look at it, and it's a couple days later. People are not used to that.
I find that like so hard to imagine. Like I almost feel like that, particularly some of our clients who are like older and not tech savvy, and they get really, really picky, and they see like some alignment that's off on like the Webflow first draft, and they're like, well, this is just completely not what we want. And they really, really get hung up on things like that. There's a few clients we have, like mostly in trades and things, where they don't quite, I don't know, maybe there's like a transitionary phase that will happen over the next few years where clients become more used to seeing things in that format. Because I mean, we can try it out, but I would be amazed if, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't want to by any means suggest that it works all the time. There's plenty of
Well, I just wonder if like there are some clients that you kind of like, gauge how they might react and kind of like build the prototype out accordingly or something. There's a man in my head, Tim, who's a real estate guy, who would just wouldn't work.
I literally had a client one time. We built the site, filled it with lorem ipsum, just you could see what it looks like, whatever. And he called us pissed off. And this guy was he was a jerk anyways, but he's like, what is all this Spanish doing on my site? We speak American here. I'm like, first off, idiot, it's not Spanish. Second off, calm down. No, he was the worst. But yeah, like Rachel said, in my experience with some of my clients, they don't understand that. I certainly think they could. I think it's a great way to do it, and I think it would be an awesome way to do it. Like Rachel said, hopefully more clients can just start learning that.
I think like some clients are just so visually oriented versus ones that aren't. And the ones who aren't visually oriented get really thrown by lorem ipsum in a way that completely surprised me when I started showing it to people. They'd be like, yeah, but what does it say here? I don't feel like this communicates what my company is about. And it's like, well, we haven't got a heading yet, but. So
okay, so
I think you're onto something. You definitely have to kind of prime your client a little bit and just kind of walk them through it and remember that this client isn't the same as the last one you just taught. It's a totally new one. So
not
yeah.
him.
Rinse and repeat.
So, Colleen, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say something really fast. I'm, I don't work for an agency, don't have an agency. So this, maybe doesn't necessarily work, but listening to a couple of the suggestions and comments that have been made, could part of where business is starting to change be using some no-code tools and using Webflow, that if you've got a potential client, you do an online RFP, you borrow some stuff from what Joy was saying about showing different kind of nav options, have someone going through a form. Do you like this layout? Do you like this layout? Do you like this layout? And then there's a step in that process where upload some content about your business from your existing about page and a couple of headlines. You integrate that, for example, maybe something with Zapier or some other tool that then, since you can't have a form, put stuff in a Webflow collection, dynamically create a couple of mock-ups based on things that people have selected and send that out and start the process there. And if it's so automated, maybe that gets around a little bit of those things that Rachel was saying about, well, the spacing was off here or something. And maybe that helps that speed to the S to S thing that you were talking about, Kyle.
That's an interesting thing. You've seen the how much is your website going to cost, and you're like, I want this. And then, you do the form, you fill it out, and then it's this price that's just kind of based on, anyway, but I don't know if I've really seen it where you go through and you're like, you show 3 different nav options. Maybe there's, logos center aligned with nav on either side. Then there's like left nav, or there's like, and so it's like, which one do you like? And then it's like, what style? And so you're kind of going through this like interactive, I'm thinking of Typeform almost, where, you've got some images. So you collect that. And I don't think you could like build a prototype automatically, but you could then go, oh, well, to Johnny's point, I've got my little wireframe kit, right? And I know Lenker has got like their starter project. And so you build a starter project, you look at someone's answers and you go, okay, well, they want the logo top left, nav on the, navigation on the right, the menu on the right. And then they want this kind of a style, and they want, and there's a few other things, and you can quickly build it together. Maybe you throw their logo in, throw their colors in, because those are all just, you can make those as variables or, anyway. So, you throw their fonts in, and then your S2S is real low, right? But that's kind of that could be an interesting way, because since they're like choosing it, you could say this, from what we heard, this is a starting point, right? This is that first step. And then, there's like a thing with web apps, going back to my mentor mate days here talking to clients, but like if you can get users to like modify their web app a little bit, like, oh, like they upload an avatar and they put in their name and they maybe like choose a couple settings, like now they've like customized it. And so they're like, they've like started buying in. And so because they've started buying in, they're less likely to leave. And that might be the same kind of a thing where, oh, I've selected this website, like I picked all the stuff and now they've brought it back to me. It's like, this is something that I've crafted and I'm that much closer. It's kind of an interesting idea.
I'd be interested to know where content fits in some of your systems, right? Because one of the things you know, that thing about, well, we stick a bunch of lorem ipsum in and then people don't know what to do with that. Where is content fitting into your process, and would putting content first help with some of the buy-in when it comes to, well, now you're actually looking at what your site would look like, right?
Have you heard
of words?
Have you heard of Snazzy AI? Snazzy.ai.
Not sure.
It's there's a few tools that are out there now that are like this, and I used it the other. I like signed up for I did the free account thing to like test it out. Didn't really have a good use case, and then the other day I like needed it, and so I was like, oh, I should go back to this and try it. Anyway, what you do is it's copywriting using AI, and you put in information about your business. You know, you can do it however much information you want, like the name, the industry, all that stuff. And then they've got all these different like types of content. So they're like, oh, you need headlines and subtitles? Great. Click our headlines and subtitles generator. And then we'll give you like 6 different options. Oh, you need product descriptions. Great. We can do that. You know, you need what they've got, I don't know, 20. And there's a lot of different tools that are like this. Now it gets you about 85% of the way there. So it's not perfect, but you can take that 85% and then you can like combine it with other options that they give you. And all of a sudden in what would have I was writing some content for a real estate website that I did, and it probably would have taken me 2 to 3 hours to write this stuff. Cause even though I used to have my real estate license, I don't remember much about it. I don't know. I was going to like sit there and, you know, you like type it and then you're like, that sucks. You type it again. That sucks. I went and did it, loaded it all up. I had all my content in like 20 minutes. It was fantastic. And so I could see, to your point, Penny, about content, I could see using a tool like that. You add a couple questions in that form, in that type form about, you know, you selected your layouts and then you get to the end, you're like, so just tell us a couple sentences, bullet points, words, doesn't matter. Tell us about your business. And you take that and you load it into like a Snazzy AI. It's like an AI generating tool, right? And they could come up with some placeholder text for you that would actually probably sound pretty good and be a lot closer. Now, that said, you might run into the situation like Rachel has where they're like, this isn't perfect. I would never say this. This isn't quite perfect. And so they might not, you know, you got to know your client.
Sure.
But
I definitely just think on the spectrum of like being copy oriented and visually oriented, it surprised me in the short time I worked at Lenker to sort of experience the whole range. And some people will look at something that's pulled together for a look and feel and like to discuss the vibe, and they get it, and they almost don't even care the copy that ends up on the page. And then there's the entire opposite end of the spectrum. So I don't know, mostly my agency experience at this point is just trying to download that information and have it ready to kind of like feed into client expectations as you move along that process. Because I honestly think you could do it differently for anyone that comes along. Option number 3, Webflow oriented.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my next question, unless I can keep peppering with questions, I've always got them. We talked about starter projects and wireframes and what I'm curious, for those who are using, and even if I guess for the Webflow people out there, how often are you starting with a template? That's not yours. That's not yours. Because I've done it, and it like helps get me like it like gets you off the ground like really quickly. But then I find that I'm like fighting their way of doing it. And so then I'm like, why did I do this? But I do like some of their interactions and stuff there. But I'm just gonna kind of throw it out. How often are you starting with someone else's template?
In terms of oh, go ahead. I see Seattle raising the hand.
Oh yeah, I've had to do it twice for white label projects for a client who had purchased one. One was for e-commerce, and the other one was a project that we ended up having to move over to WordPress because we couldn't get the functionality with the Webflow for everything they wanted without hiring a bunch of React developers probably. So yeah, I did not have the best experience with either one of those, especially the one that was converted to WordPress, because that was my first try using the Udesly adapter. And it took me about 20 times to actually get a working website to spin up in WordPress and not have things all in the wrong place. But once we did, it looked great. All the interactions and everything else that we had designed, those weren't built into the template. I did all the interactions with, they had a bunch of Lottie things that they wanted in there to animate on scrolls. So I had to do a lot of that. But I was surprised some of that stuff actually went over with the Udesly conversion to WordPress and still worked on a WordPress site. But it did take about 20 times. But the other one was for an e-commerce site. And that template, I would not say, it looked like a WordPress, like someone who's a WordPress developer, template builder, had decided to build some Webflow templates and had them for sale. And I don't know if the client picked the cheapest one. I didn't really look through what was available in the e-commerce marketplace for e-commerce templates. But yeah, the class names, and there was still some like div 286s in there. It just drove me crazy. But yeah, I don't do them on my own, but I have built my own UI kit, and I did do a design system that's on the Webflow Showcase clonables. So that I usually start with something like that myself.
Nice.
I've used a couple of templates a couple of times. I haven't built a lot of sites, but I have used templates on a couple, and the same kind of thing where you kind of get to the point where it's like I'm changing things, and especially because I was also learning Webflow at the same time, so you're kind of leaving a fair amount of technical debt behind. One thing I have been doing though for the last 6-8 months or so is using something called System Flow, which has a Figma component where you can do all of your design work in Figma. And then they have a version of all of the symbols set up as components in Webflow. And you basically say, okay, so I'm starting with this item from Figma. I go over here, I pull in that same item, and I carry my design over. I don't work in Figma because I'm not really a designer. I'm much happier working in the browser anyway. So I just use it in Webflow. I can put a site together quickly. My biggest issue now is not making all the sites look the same because there's still a limited amount of design within that, but it does help me kind of build a site more quickly when I'm, not trying to build every component or every piece by hand. So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I have a question, which is vaguely off topic. And actually at this point, I should announce to the crew that it is coming up to 9 o'clock, and no one need feel at all rude for dropping out if they need to call it a night. Thank you so much everyone for coming. But my question actually, Johnny, you're like a relatively new member of Halftone staff, right? I think you said like a few months back.
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
It's,
okay.
we started probably like I think January, Mike, this year.
So I mean, at this point, assuming Mike that you were the one doing the hiring, are you looking for like people who know Webflow at this point? Is this now part of your hiring decision making that you're actively seeking Webflow users, or would you still be kind of open to training people up? I don't know. I'm kind of interested just to hear how you envision growing your team and whether Webflow is like a linchpin of that plan.
I'm not sure that I would call it a requirement as of this point, especially since we've seen a lot of like shift in our business, as in we're doing more like strategic type large project work for larger clients. So the need for a Webflow skill set is, I don't know if it's lower than it was before, but it's just different. But I almost, like I said, like I'm picturing it as, I'm viewing Webflow as more of a tool now. So I mean, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, and Johnny is a special case, I think, because we connected directly about Webflow. But like, let's say a junior designer, I don't think there's anybody that's joined recently or that has done work with us where I haven't said like, hey, you need to like at least dip your toes in the water and get to know this tool a little bit, in the same way that maybe you know After Effects a little bit, right? Like I'm picturing it as part of a larger skill set, but not a deal breaker, if that makes sense, or not a core skill set. Like I don't think we would hire somebody who didn't know how to use like an XD or Figma or Sketch, right? I consider all three of those to be pretty much the same. But I don't think I can say the same for Webflow. Maybe, you know, a year or two down the road, though, I don't see it going anywhere, and I see the importance of knowing the tool, you know, inching upwards month by month. So we'll just kind of have to see where it goes. You know, there could be the cool new thing could be something completely different in 12 months too. So I try to keep that really front of mind, that like tools come and go, and it's more really about a core design skill set for us than it is about tool knowledge.
It's interesting you say that, because like you're talking about with XD and Sketch and Figma all kind of being the same, because
Yep.
I was never trained as a designer. I took a couple months of like a vocational school or whatever. And so I knew like Photoshop and Illustrator a little bit, but then picking up, like you kind of know that, and then picking up Sketch wasn't that much of a stretch. And then picking up Figma wasn't that much of a stretch. And what I'm seeing now is there's a lot of tools. If you look at, like I'm on Product Hunt, I see all the products that are coming out in Product Hunt and all this stuff. And you see a lot of web builders that are actually, from an interface standpoint, are kind of mirroring Webflow.
Yeah. Yep,
and
totally.
they have a similar look and feel. And so, kind of to your point of, if you know Sketch, Figma, XD, it's the learning curve's real low, but you got to know something, right? You don't want to start from scratch. And I wonder if that's what it'll kind of evolve into. It's like, oh, I saw one that was called No Loco. No Loco is like more of an app builder versus me kind of that's, yeah. So anyway, No Loco, like, oh, No Loco. Okay. That's cool. Cause your learning curve to do our Webflow sites is going to be real low. Right. But you've got, if you're out there, building WordPress sites, if you're rolling your own WordPress themes, that's a really different, you're a developer, you're a front-end developer, your learning curve will be lower, but your S2S will be lower. It all comes back to the S2S, but it's you've got to know something, I think is kind of, I could see that happening. Adrian, did you said you have an agency out there in Seattle. Are you finding, are you hiring based on Webflow skill sets?
I would be not at the point where we're looking. It's kind of, let's see how. One thing about being a community leader is that you meet like a lot of people that are learning Webflow or trying to find out more about it or advance their skill levels. So I've hired people for one or two off projects, but not as a full-time person, that I've met through the community meetups and workshops that we've done. So I was hiring specifically for Webflow projects, and I didn't have to do a lot of vetting for this because I had already, this was before pre-pandemic where we're actually in person, and we were going over BEM class naming and, starting sites with a design style guide and all those things that are, requirements for me, probably for everybody else, getting a site spun up. So I kind of had a baseline of what I knew that I was looking for and what their skill levels were. But I haven't ever tried to hire anyone off one of the Guru or Upwork or any of the other platforms. And I'm not sure how I would test what their Webflow skill levels are without giving them like some small starter projects to see how they worked and how quickly they worked and what things look like. But I would probably, since I've been able to build out my own UI starter kit, I would probably just have people start from that and go over how, have some docs in Notion and maybe even some videos, so to confirm what I was looking for and what they needed to do, what conventions they had to follow to work on projects. But I don't want to do any more WordPress projects, but they keep coming across my lap, and sometimes Webflow, I can convince them to move over to Webflow, and sometimes they just end up in WordPress. And for that, we use Oxygen Builder, which is actually fairly close to Webflow. And on the Facebook forums for that platform, there's actually, I'd say about 20% of the people I see there are also in the Webflow Facebook global designers group. So I recognize a lot of names back and forth in both those groups. And the workflow, the process is setting up your naming systems, and the structure of the builder is fairly similar. I mean, as far as WordPress builders go, it's fairly similar to how Webflow works. So if you do have to use both platforms, because I looked at PineGrow and some other builders. I was using Beaver Builder for a while. I never got into Divi or Elementor, but I did get stuck having to rebuild a site that was built in Divi, and I was like, I can't imagine anybody uses Divi for WordPress. But Oxygen works the process is very similar to Webflow. So if you get stuck having to do both, I would recommend looking into Oxygen.
I've got one other question, and unless other people have questions and they want to chime in, otherwise we can have this be the last one. But so one of the things that I've been running into at my day job is so our site is the company's website. I built it. It's built on Webflow. We've got an intranet that's built on Webflow and MemberStack and and a couple of JetBoost and stuff. Then we also use FormStack. Primarily, I like to use FormStack for document automation. So we'll create a FormStack form and then send that through and automate documents. So basically, if someone fills out a form, and then based on what they filled out, like we can just spit out a totally custom PDF or PowerPoint or whatever, right? And then we've got Airtable and and a couple other things. Anyway, and Typeform. Anyway, my point is, we've got this suite of no-code tools, right? And as I've been working there, it's been about a year now, more and more projects come up. This is like an old school insurance company, right? And so they're doing everything manually. And I'm like, you spend 3 hours doing that? We could build this thing and we'll just do it for you, And so that's what I'm thinking, but I don't have enough bandwidth. And so what I need though is someone who can do low code, because there's or even a little, no code, low code. But if you just go out and you're like, hey, I need someone who does no code, oftentimes they're like, oh, I do Bubble, or I do Webflow, or I do Jotform, or it's like I'm curious if people have had experience like or have any thoughts. Are you feeling like, do you feel like Webflow is its own little thing, or is like the no code skill set, is that a different thing than Webflow? I don't really know where I'm going with this. I'm trying to just like open this up for conversation, but it seems like having the skill set of like knowing your low code tools is kind of unique, because not only do you need to know low code, you might need to know little code. And then once you know that little code, you actually need to know specific no code tools in order to come in and actually help out. And every stack is a little different. And so I don't know, just kind of opening it up if people have run into similar situations, or if any kind of thoughts. I'll just kind of leave it there.
I would definitely say that is true. Once you get past, during the introduction, I mentioned that I've been getting more into using Parabola, Integromat, Airtable, MemberStack, Zapier in the last 9 months to a year, and JetBoost as well. And I think you need to have those in your toolkit to build out. I mean, if you want to do a business strategy for a company and you want to provide them with automation and hook them up to their CRM and all this stuff so they're not doing everything manually, you kind of have to know all those other no-code tools. And at this point, I think rather than hiring someone who's specifically Webflow, I'd be looking for someone that knows those integrations, at least MemberStack, because there's supposed to be a big market for that.
Do you think that there's like a base of like, oh, you're a front-end web developer, you must know HTML and CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. Like that's what you need to know, right? Is there a no code or low code version of that? Like, hey, you might have some of these other things that are often on the fringe, but if you're going to be a legitimate no code developer, you need to know these things. I would say Zapier is probably one of them. In my opinion, I would also say Webflow, but I think there's probably some Wix developers out there, or Squarespace is probably a better example, that you can get away with using those. But I'm curious.
Well, the thing with some of the no-code tools like Airtable, Integromat, Zapier work great with Webflow, but they also work with Shopify and some other tools. Like if you're doing like a headless CMS, or you're taking your Webflow project and exporting it to Netlify or putting it on Firebase or something, and you don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing Node or Vue or something to connect everything together, you can still use some no-code tools to connect things together.
I would say, having an understanding of APIs and webhooks is probably like a really good starting point, because then everything else kind of you understand how to click all those things together once you have that basic understanding. And then it's like, then it really doesn't matter the tool, as long as you understand what it is you need to do to connect them together. Then it's just a matter of learning that tool, right?
Yeah, and there is a way of thinking about it, right? Understanding the data flow, and But go ahead, Johnny. I cut you off.
No problem. Just speaking of personal experience too, God, the reason I got into no code was really because of Zapier, and then from Zapier, I had to learn, like what Penny said, webhooks and a small amount of APIs to know how to connect that, right? And so, I guess to really help answer your question, if you're looking for somebody and you're trying to find kind of a category of people that maybe potentially could hire, I'd say number one is Zapier. Number two is potentially customer success people in a software startup. So like in the past, I've worked with Copper CRM, and their customer success people were very scrappy, where they taught us how to use Zapier, how to connect our systems, our processes to their CRM system. And then, so really I would even consider looking at custom, depending on the role, what exactly they did.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought. Did you like Copper out of curiosity?
Yeah, I love Copper. It's if you are using G Suite, it's pretty neat. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
I think this is I think when you kind of started and kicked off this question, that this is a new type of job title that's going to be coming. And there's a person who's in the no code space who's based in Atlanta, where there's a lot of no code activity going on, by the name of Philip Lakin. And one of the things that he has started is no code ops. And this is specifically for people who work in companies and it is their job, partially, business operations, business efficiency, but using no code tools along with a little bit of low code to basically make sure that a business is operating as efficiently as possible. So I would say that's maybe part of maybe where you want to go to find what you're looking for, and to kind of just piggyback on some things that were said earlier in the conversation about like, hey, if you knew Figma, if you knew Sketch, if you knew this, you can then jump into that. Similarly, you can start with Zapier, you get those concepts down. It's easier to then pick up Integromat. Oh, Zapier doesn't have a hook into doing such and such, but Integromat does, and you're just able to start transferring skills.
So one of the things that I've noticed about myself is like it's all project based, right? And one of the cool things that Paul showed is he's like, just, I want to make this thing, and so I'm going to do this and try it. But I get so far, I like to think that I know Webflow fairly well, and I know a lot of these tools fairly well. But there are certain times like Zapier, you can take that. It's crazy how much functionality they have with like, you can, I did one the other day where they were like I was throwing in custom JavaScript, and like you can do all this crazy stuff, and you don't realize actually, like there are some people who go really deep on a specific tool, and then there are people who go more shallow on a lot of tools. And it's just kind of interesting how you can kind of create your niche. Colleen, like what you're saying is there's a new job title, right? And there's a new there's a new marketplace for this, and some companies are going to need that wide and shallow, and then other people are going to be like, no, actually we are neck deep in Zapier, and we need a Zapier expert. And you could make a career for yourself just being like the Zapier expert, and you might not need to know all the others, but you know enough to be dangerous, but you go really deep. It's a really cool time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, kind of to piggyback with that as well, I saw someone post on Twitter within the past couple of days, just that they had a whole big gotcha moment and had to rethink things. They were doing a bunch of stuff with Notion, and all of a sudden running into problems with their clients. Their clients could not get into Notion, or the clients that they were wanting to bring on board. And basically what they then discovered was its terms and conditions. Enterprise clients, so they had been working with small mom and pop shops that had no problem with Notion, and then boom, they're leveling up. Enterprise clients are saying, nope, we're blocking Notion for security reasons, this, that, and the other. And so now this person's going back and having to rethink, how am I doing documentation and project flow and stuff like that? But, as part of going deep, going broad, some of it's potentially, are you a regulated industry? Are you this? Are you that? Are you European? Where are you doing your data storage, GDPR? I mean, so I don't think there's going to be any one fit solution.
Yeah. Have you, I said it was going to be one question, but just quick, do you guys know Fathom? Have you heard of Fathom?
Fathom Analytics?
Yeah. Have you used it?
I have not. Are they the ones that had that there was all that, one of those tools recently, there was a ton of activity a couple months ago on Twitter that was not so, or maybe that was plausible. I can't remember which.
Yeah, I don't think it was Fathom. Fathom is Paul Jarvis's
Yep.
thing,
Okay.
right?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I took his Chimp Essentials, his Chimp Essentials course. It was actually really helpful, but with Google kind of doing away with cookies coming up here, I'm starting to rethink like, oh, what's my strategy here? Because I'm not like a marketing expert when it comes to analytics and all that stuff. I don't know enough to be dangerous, but it's an interesting, I think we're also coming up to this next, we're doing away with cookies, and now you have to do like, server side analytics, like there's opportunities. I think your guy Neymar
Yeah.
would, I listened to one of their podcasts, like every time you come up to something that is like I can't do this, or someone's moved my cheese, or like I don't have, that's an opportunity. And I think there's going to be a lot of those.
What if you two are looking for future event topics? I mean, that along with Apple, with what they've said about email analytics, I mean, that could be a whole chunk of content.
That's a good call. That's good. I'm going to write that down right now.
I mean, at this point, I have to say, and I always wrench people away from these beautiful flowing conversations. But hey, Jonah, I noticed you dropped out and then came right back in. I'm singling you out to say hi. It's because I know you're a first timer, so I don't know if you feel inclined to unmute or unmask. Feel free, but otherwise, please know that you've been acknowledged. Thanks for coming. No, quiet listener. All right. Oh no.
He says thank you. I've appreciated everyone coming. I don't want to end the party, but I know that people do have lives, and we're trying to do these not as infrequently so that people feel like they want to come back. So we're doing them a little more frequently, and maybe keeping them to like an hour and a half. This one's almost gone to 2 hours, but I want to just say thank you. I feel honored, very honored that not only did we have a good showing, and we had great conversation and great presentations from Johnny and Paul and Mike, but I feel honored that we have we've got our Sarasota contingent here. We had Seattle, we've got Canada, we've got, this is fantastic. And I want to just extend an open invite. If you ever want to come back again, we would love to see you again.
Yeah, be great. Yeah. Would love to. And thanks for Rachael Rachael had reached out to me to let me know. So I would not have known about it if she had not done that. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, it's actually been wonderful to speak with you a bit more. And I mean, I know that you're like kind of the no code queen in the community. So I I feel like you've earned that reputation with flying colors in this meeting. And I really want to ask you like extra questions. And you as well, Penny. Like I actually noted down webhooks and API because I want to do some homework. And thank you for your contribution.
And that's maybe another topic there. I mean, right,
Yeah.
Penny? I mean,
Yeah.
webhooks and APIs, that's something that I don't think there's enough documentation out there for no code.
Someone that like plays in this space, I am always coming into situations where the term API comes up in ways that block me from understanding and moving further with things. So I will have it now on my list of like things to figure out, because it's a puzzle piece that without which you kind of somewhat blocked from fully engaging with like certain areas of conversation about no code or low code, or even just like Webflow in general.
Right.
Because, Dustin, he left the conversation about 10 minutes ago, but he talks about API all the time, and I nod along. And then I minimize images for him.
Well, I'll tell you that what I know is from watching the Airtable live streams that Aaron Korumlit does. That's pretty much all I know about APIs and webhooks is from that. So I'm not using a lot right now, but I'm learning and I'm understanding it a bit. So, if nothing else, going back and watching some of those on YouTube to, sort of get a sense of it, it's a great starting point.
Okay.
At least, yeah. But thank you again to Colleen for suggesting this, posting it in the Floxy's group. And thank you very much, Rachael, for reaching out today. It was great. It's nice
Awesome.
folks.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. Would love to see you back. Otherwise, have a great